Welcome back to our walk through the book of Acts series, and we are picking up with Acts chapter 16, but we just finished maybe what is really kind of the hinge chapter. So much of really where the church becomes and where it goes swings on that decision of the Jerusalem Council, as we call that meeting, where Peter and James stood up and said, we shouldn't make it difficult for the Gentiles who have received salvation to follow Jesus. And so they limit it down to just this very few things, because it's all about, by grace you are saved through faith. It's what Jesus has already done for us. Well, now Paul and Barnabas and Silas are returning back to Antioch and spreading this good news that this is the decision, and it leads to them going off on another journey. But this time Paul separates from Barnabas, and now it's Paul and Silas that go. And it says that at first in this they begin to go back through what would be modern day Turkey. They call it Asia, and they try a couple of different paths and directions, north and east. And it says that God kind of blocks them. The Spirit of Jesus won't let them go into these places. And eventually Paul has this vision of someone from Greece saying, hey, come over here to Greece. And so Paul and his crew jump on a boat and head to Greece. And this is the kind of the first transition to what we would think of as modern day Europe or Western Europe, that kind of a thing. It's going to become a whole movement that's going to begin starting from right here. And we pick up with the story of Paul in the city of Philippi. And he always starts with the synagogue. He always starts with the Jewish people who are waiting for the Messiah. And this time is no different. And so he goes and looks for them, but there's not enough Jewish people to make a synagogue in the city. And so he goes out to a river where it says some women gather for prayer on the Sabbath day. And he tells them the gospel and the good news about Jesus. Several of them become believers and followers. And it begins kind of the very first church in Europe right there in this lady Lydia's house. Well, they stay there for at least the duration of a week. And as they're there and going through the marketplace, and Paul is now taking this good news to the Gentile believers. And this is where you're going to see this theme start. And this is key for really the rest of the book of Acts in a lot of ways. Everywhere Paul goes, he's going to speak first in the synagogues, and then he's going to take it to the Gentile population. And the churches are all going to become a mixture of these two things, these two backgrounds, these two separate groups, sometimes with different languages, cultures, religious backgrounds, race backgrounds, ethnicity, right? All of those things are going to be different backgrounds, socioeconomic, everything. And yet they're all coming together in one church in every city that he goes to. And so we see him walking around. Well, he's in the middle of going into this marketplace when it says for several days there's this little slave girl who's got this spirit in her, and it's like a unclean spirit, a demonic spirit, who gives her the ability to prophesy, and she is like a fortune teller for the people who own her. And Paul turns around and basically just says, in the name of Jesus, spirit be gone from this little girl, and he casts this demon out. And now she can't prophesy. Now she's lost value to her owners. And they start a riot, grab Paul, drag him in front of their magistrates and their courts. And they tell them that these guys are here upsetting, the whole world, and kind of this big exaggeration. Well, they hear this. They grab Paul, they grab Silas, they beat him, and they throw them in prison, and they put them in the stocks, where their feet are latched in and locked in, these big wooden pieces. And so it says that Paul and Silas are now in this prison in Philippi, no trial, nothing like that. And it's getting late, but I love this verse. It says this in verse 25, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing songs to God as the other prisoners listened. Right? So here they are in the stocks. They've been beaten. It's totally unjust. It's not okay. In fact, they're Roman citizens. It's flat out illegal for that to happen. But here they are, not complaining, not starting a riot, right? Not making a fuss even. I mean, it's really amazing. Here's these two men in this for the gospel now saying, what? We're just going to worship God right here in our cell. It's one of the most, I think, profound pictures in the book of Acts for me, is this reminder, this imagery. Here's these guys just sitting together, singing in the dark. They're in the dungeon. There are no lights, but there's other prisoners, and they're listening to them, and they're hearing them. And it's like God is hearing this worship and this praise that they are singing, and there's this earthquake that hits, and it opens up all the jail cell doors, and the guard comes running and sees that his prison doors are wide open, and that he assumes everybody, all the This prisoners have escaped, which means his life would be forfeit. He's ready to pulls out a sword, ready to commit suicide when Paul yells out, like, don't do it. We're all still here. Like, it's okay. And so they rush in with lights and find Paul still there, Silas, all the other prisoners. They're all still there. Nobody has run off in this moment. And it gives Paul and Silas this opportunity to share with this guy who they are and what they're all about, what Jesus has done. In fact, it says this Roman guard who even asked them, sirs, what must I do to be saved? And how does he know to ask that? He's been listening to him sing, listening to him talk. I'm sure they've even shared with him on their way in, but he wasn't necessarily ready to hear it right then. But here's what it says happens. In verse 31, it says, they said to him, and answer that question of what must I do to be saved, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and all the people in your house. So Paul and Silas told the message of the Lord to the jailer and all the people in his house. At that hour of the night, the jailer took Paul and Silas and washed their wounds. Then he and all of his people were baptized immediately. Like, this is the whole goal of what they're doing. This is the missionary journey. This is a missionary church. And I don't mean like individual church. I mean, this is Jesus' church, the missionary church, taking the gospel, the good news into the world. And even though at times it doesn't seem like it's received or it's not going well, and yet God himself has got the plan for how his gospel is going to go forward. And it reminds me of a story. I just read it this week. And it's from a modern-day missionary, a modern-day, actually, Bible smuggler. He's smuggling Bibles into countries where they still don't want them, in this case, in the Middle East. And we'll call this guy John. It just says that John flew into one of these airports. He's got a suitcase filled with his personal possessions, but also about 40 Bibles. And he's going through customs and the checkpoint, and he's just praying and hoping that God will get him through another checkpoint. And at this point in time, they open up his suitcase. They look at all these Bibles. They want to know where they're from. Well, they take him and put him into one of the interrogation rooms. And then it's just this onslaught of police and investigators and people find out who is he, who's he meeting with, who are his contacts, who are these Bibles for, all of these things. Well, they throw him in a cell and they're basically waiting and saying, the next flight, we're putting you back on a plane and you're being deported out of our country. And as he's waiting, one of the guards is coming by and is talking to him and makes a statement about how, like, you seem different than the other people we generally have in jail here that we throw in. And he kind of takes this opportunity as they're chatting just to share about his own life. And this jailer, this prison guard, shares, his dad is very ill, very sick right now, and he's very worried about him. And so John offers to say, look, can I pray for your dad? And when he prays for him, kind of just opens up this door and he gives his whole testimony. He tells the story of what you must do to be saved, that you just have to put your faith and your trust in Jesus, that he came as God's own son and sacrificed for our sin. And he shares this, and I mean, unbelievably, this guard right there prays with him to receive Jesus in this jail as John's praying through the bars with him. He's crying, the guard's crying, like he can't believe it. From that moment, the guard says, all right, look, let me see if I can help you. And he gets him out of the jail, gets him and recovers back the Bibles they had taken away from him, escorts him out of there. John didn't want to get arrested. John didn't want to have this derailment. John didn't know what the heck was going to happen, but it's just kind of this really cool picture as they shared it was, but here's God's plan, and he's willing to even derail what seems like his purpose, but to accomplish a whole different purpose, to connect with one person, to bring them salvation. And that is so often what we see in the life of Paul and Silas. And sometimes it happens in our own lives as well, where we just have to be sensitive to listen and hear to where God is leading us. Who does he want us to have a conversation with? And who should we share the incredible good news and story of what God has done in our life through faith in Jesus? You guys, we're going to get to see some more of this fun stuff in Paul's ministry as we keep going through the book of Acts. I hope you have yourself a great evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of you on Saturday, live and in person, for the rest online as well. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Talk to you soon.